Hello everybody, I'm Guan Kun from Schneider Electric Singapore, working under the Digital Energy Department as a Senior Product Application Engineer. And today, we'll share with you some information with regards to the startup commissioning of the EcoStruxure panel server, the next generation IoT gateway for an intelligent power network from Schneider Electric. So some basic housekeeping first, the web page for the EcoStruxure panel server. This is basically where you will find the relevant information for the various product models from the PAS 600, 600L, 600T, 800, 800L and 800P. There is another model which is the PAS 400, the Universal Panel Basic. The commissioning steps will be similar. From this web page, you can find product information, overview, documentation, as well as the software and firmware updates that will be periodically refreshed and posted here. And from this, we will do a little bit of basic computation or basic configuration first. So let's go to the control panel. No, not this. We do not want to use this particular panel, but we want to actually open up here and type in control panel because we want to actually access the bare bones version. If you start seeing this page and you don't like to see it, just hit small icons and you get the typical control panel. What we want to do is go to the network sharing center, click it, and click on adapter settings. From here, you will realize that I have actually two network connections. One of them is actually going to my internet, one of them is actually going to the PAS 800L which I have set up. So in this case, we will need to make sure that we only have one network connection active. So what I'm about to do is to disable the internet connection. So right now, I'm only left with the connection to the PAS 800. From here, let us just minimize this. Okay, I'll just close off this guy. And we'll go back to File Explorer. And you'll be thinking, why am I doing this? Okay, because what we want to do is that we want to use the IPv6 function to search for it. And before that, of course, that reminds me for a little bit of thing. When you go into this network connection that is going to the PAS 800L, double check that there's some IP address that is actually here, but there's no other IP addresses found in the gateway, DNS server, Win server, because it is never assigned, because you are not connected to a DHCP server. So let's close this, hit Properties, V4 is checked, V6 is checked. V6 has no configuration, just to be sure. V4 also is automatic. Let me just shrink this and we go back to network. And you'll find that they'll say network discovery is turned off because this network is not identified. It is not known whether is it private or public. Hence, therefore, Windows will block the network discovery function. But we know in this case, we need to enable this. So hit OK. Click on this and say turn on network discovery and file sharing. It will tell you and make these two choices. No, make the network that I'm connected to as a private network. Do not turn them on for all public network. That will severely degrade your cybersecurity rating of your computer. So no, make the network that I'm connected to a private network. In this case, it will do a little bit of a scan and you can see here the EcoStruxure panel server is detected. So how do we configure this guy? Very simple. Just double click it and you actually go straight to the IP address of this EcoStruxure panel server. So in this case, it is actually using a self-signed certificate and it doesn't have a valid certificate authority. Go ahead, hit Advance, hit Proceed. It's unsafe, but it is fine. It's not a problem. Once you go in, the first page that greets you is the setting of new password for security admin. This is your main setting or your main account to access the EcoStruxure panel server. Set to something that is strong and memorable. Because if you forget this, well, you're going to be having a bit of a problem trying to reset this guy. So in this case, what I'm setting in, if you want to take a look at the password, you can actually review the password. Of course, I wouldn't do that right now. Some version information for you to double check on the left to make sure that you are targeting the correct PAS 800L. If you are over a network, you can make sure that you are hitting the correct PAS 800, PAS 600 by looking at the serial number and comparing that with the actual physical unit. So in this case, I'll set new password and I will proceed later on to say security admin and using just now that password to go ahead and log in. Bad authentication. Let me try again. Okay, that's a bit of a problem. Okay, it allows me to type in a few bad passwords, but I know what actually happened. The password was not set properly. So let me just change that password again. And apply. It will tell me to log out and log back in again. If you change the password, that is what happens. And we shall be able to do things. Okay, first page, what you see is the maintenance page. Is actually for you to double check what is actually happening to this particular unit. Device communication, firmware update, restart the system monitoring, logs, and remote access if you are subscribed to our EcoStruxure Technology Platform or ETPs. On the other hand, what you can do is that you can go to the settings page and you will see a couple of things: general, network communication, Modbus devices, wireless devices, site equipment management. So right now, what we potentially want to do is to configure the IP addresses to make sure that they are within the same network range that we are using on our communication network, on our TCP/IP network. So let's go into the network communication page and you can see that it is first going into Ethernet. Ethernet mode is switched. You have a few different settings, separated or switched. That basically means that you can actually choose to use the two LAN ports on the device as a switch going to the same network, daisy chaining other units, or as two separate LAN ports going into two different LAN segments. You can actually do that, it's up to you. Switch port settings, in this case, what is set up as per normal. IPv6 is active, IPv4 is set to DHCP. Basically, it just means that this unit is going to get an IP address automatically if you connect it to a router. If you don't want it to do that, you can hit something on static and set something that you want. Okay, obviously this is not going to work, so I'm just going to leave it as DHCP for now. If you go over the DNS, this is the same thing. Make sure that your DNS setting is consistent with that of your network. If not, your unit will not be able to communicate with anything on the network or internet or vice versa. It kind of depends. DPWS is for your unit to be discovered and used by Ion Setup or other application that supports DPWS to detect downstream devices. So the standard TCP listening port is 5357. If your network admin has anything basically, if they do not like to use this particular port, you can always configure it to something else, but you just need to make sure that your tools on your application that supports DPWS is configured at the same listening or the same port that you set here. Proxy, same thing. If you need to use proxy, turn them on, set them on. In our case, nope, we're not using proxy. Wi-Fi, if you're using the Wi-Fi function on the device, you can actually turn on the Wi-Fi function, make sure that you have connected the antenna to the unit, then turn it on, and not the other way around. You may damage the internal Wi-Fi adapter without an antenna connected. You may cause it to overheat if you run it that way. So if you have made all the relevant changes, you can actually just return to settings, and just before that, I forgot something. If you make any changes here and you hit save button, remember it still does not save. And if you save it, it still doesn't apply. So hence therefore, you have a couple of chances. If you made a mistake and you don't know where the mistake was, do not save and apply, restore setting. You can always go back and do the setting again. Don't make a mistake and you do not know where the mistake was. So if you have made any changes that you want to commit to, hit save and apply, and the unit will immediately save and start using the new settings from there on. So we go back in, we take a look at the general setting. This is for you to name the device so that it's identifiable on your network, and some with the product identification unit. So this is the hardware version, there's a pre-production version. The firmware version is also a pre-production version. Date and time, if you use NTP, you can use this to configure the unit to get time from your NTP time sync server, polling 1024 seconds all the way down to once every 64 seconds, which is a little bit too often in my take. Going back to the Modbus devices, if you are using this as a Modbus gateway, like that of the COMX 510, or if you are using this to replace things like the EGX 150, EGX 100, EGX 300, you will need to go in to set the Modbus serial communication settings to be identical to those of your devices downstream. So just make sure that number one, if it's activated down here, if it is like this, obviously it's not working, it must be activated. Your baud rate must match, your parity must match, the number of bits is always 8, number of stop bits can be 1 or 2, depends on your device. Silent interval, frame delay and timeout can be configured to your preference. The longer the silent interval, of course, the slower your communication becomes. This is typically used for very, very long cable chain or long cable daisy chain setups. Rarely do you need to configure this or this. Only change them when instructed to. Line termination resistor should always be connected if your gateway is on the end of the daisy chain. If it is in the middle, make sure you do not turn on the line termination resistor. Line polarization system is also needed. Is to make sure that there is always a stable voltage across the data lines D+, D-, so that you do not get any spurious communication fired into the RS-485 daisy chain. Same thing goes, saving, save. In this case, there's no save and apply, because once you save it, it is done. Same thing goes, Modbus discovery. This is for you to discover devices and add the devices to the EcoStruxure panel server itself. So starting in discovery, it will actually pull through all 1 to 247, and if you do not want it to do that, obviously that will take a long time. You can actually just limit it to whatever that you require. For example, 2 to 30 or a mixture of them. And maybe say, I know that there's one at 50, there's one at 67, you can actually do this. So it will actually hit those ranges or those specific slave IDs. You can also add additional external servers. You can actually do a manual addition if you really want to. Modbus TCP discovery. This is actually to discover other gateways. So you can chain in other gateways for one past 800 to log or one past 600 to log. This is especially important when you are actually using these to integrate to platforms like Facility Expert, EcoStruxure Energy Hub, Energy One, or in general what we call EcoStruxure Technology Platform, ETPs. So let me just return to settings. Wireless device. If you're using this to replace a PowerTech link, an SID or an SIB, these settings will be very important. So just make sure that it is on auto. Transmission power, if this unit is actually outside the panel, you can actually set it to high level, which means that they will actually use the highest broadcasting power to operate it. Duty cycle of 5 seconds to all the way to 120 seconds. This will be determined by the total number of devices that are present in your network. How do you set these? Refer to the user manual. Wireless discovery. This is where you are actually starting to map in power tags or all the various Zigbee Pro devices that is supported by the EcoStruxure panel server. All you need to do is just hit start and just wait for the respective devices to get paired in. And if you don't want this to continue, just leave the page. Just hit stop and leave the page. In this case, it's still opening the wireless network. It's taking a little while. It's actually initializing the setup. So you just need to wait for this particular thing to go in progress. That means it is actually ready to start accepting power tags, TH110, CR110, you name it, even heat tag or whatever that is actually to be supported by the EcoStruxure panel server. In this case, I'm going to stop the scanning. If you have scanned out anything, the discovered device will be listed below, and of course you can always discover or look at the added wireless device from here. There will be a list down here. Let me return the setting and go into the last bit, site management. So this case, because this is a past 800L, it has some additional capabilities such as sampling. In this case, what we can actually do is that we can get the system to start to read the readings that's coming from the various devices. So in the event that you activate the thing and you need to flush the data as instructed, this is how you actually do it. And if you come into EcoStruxure panel server, if you have added any things below, like just now, then what you can actually do is that to start to look at the individual device, what are the readings present. In this case, I haven't added any, so it doesn't show up down here. And this view will change with different firmware. So do not be alarmed that what you are looking at is not the same as what I'm looking at. Because today, what you're looking at is very much a pre-production firmware. And with this, thank you for your attention and thank you for your time coming along for the ride with me. I'm Guan Kun, signing off from here.